Yeah, look at it. I bought that one just in case you needed the stand.
Thank you. Maybe I'll do that. Just use that.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
We're a little bit late because my friend Dave here was a little bit late getting here. So yes, this is 4680Q on downtown Niagara Falls, and we're also live on Facebook. So we're trying to do the best we can, you know, and we're getting out there and saying hello to everybody. And I'm hoping you can see Dave okay.
Yeah, well, I can't see Dave, but I think I'm in there.
You're in there, I think you're there.
Kind of, oh, yeah. Although, yeah, the good-looking part of the painting.
Anyway, so you sent me a question this morning, which boils down to this. Are libraries worth it in the era of the ebook?
That's right. Are libraries worth it? Are they worth it at all? Fort Erie is about to revamp their library, and one of the things they said they're going to do is like sort of get rid of all that stuff. They're going to downsize. Downsize and libraries just don't go together, if you ask me. And they said that a lot of self-help books, you don't need them anymore. You can get everything online. Well, that's true, but I can tell you I got some excellent self-help books in the library over the past years. I had a very old house, and I was able to get a book that was made in written in 1915 about carpentry, and because my house was built in 1913, it was perfect. It was everything I needed to know about that house was in there. Other houses and other things as well, but it was ideal, and I doubt very much about it. And I went looking for that book time and time again, and I always get it, and then next thing you know, somebody tossed it out because I guess nobody used it enough. I think that book was a rare thing. It was a beautiful book.
Well, libraries do sell books. I often buy books from the library, and in the Niagara Falls libraries, they're often up for a sale for $1 a piece.
I donate magazines to the library. I donate archaeology magazine. I used to do history magazine, things of that kind, because they don't. That is valuable to them, like a magazine is. They can circulate that around, and most people can take them.
Well, I guess they toss those when they're done.
Yeah, and they're actually full of information, a lot of really good information. Like if you're into archaeology or something like I am, you get a lot of really kind of light reading in archaeology. You know, they'll tell you about their digs and so on and so forth. But you can get those in the library. You just got to have a look for them. I think the library is not being used as much because people don't know what is there. Like there are all kinds of periodicals you can get in the library, and you just have to ask for them. Like newspapers, computers, computer education. So the library sure has changed a bit, but it still is very valuable. But the question is it that valuable?
Well, I think this is a question which probably has been coming up over the years since they created the library. If you look back to the 1700s or the 1800s or whenever they created the first library, and I don't know when that is, they did so really on the basis that the idea was to give normal everyday folk, the people who couldn't afford to buy books, the opportunity to read a book.
That's true. Back in the day, even after the Gutenberg press, books were very expensive to the average person. Now, lots of private libraries out there, lots of university libraries out there, they've been going on since ancient times. The huge libraries at Alexandria that burned down, and the one in Baghdad that burned down in the 1200s were disasters to the human civilization.
Yeah, I've been to a fantastic library, and it has the Hansard British Parliament edition going back to about 1650.
Wow.
And some of those, I wouldn't pick the books up off the library. This was at the Inner Temple in central London. but it's a fantastic library, and it's the sort of library that everybody should be, you know, that we need. We need those libraries. Now, the thing is, yes, it's true that university libraries are not accessible for everybody. But the point about libraries is that they're accessible, they're supposed to be there for those that cannot afford to buy books. Now, we could argue that with the cost of a book at $1 and something, or for an e-book these days, that maybe that's, you know, perfectly acceptable, and who can't afford that for $1 and something?
Well, yeah, true, but I still think there's probably, you know, the library is the place where a collection of knowledge is, and that part of it, just the ambiance is it. And remember, library is the original socialism, dun 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 dun, because I think it was Benjamin Franklin who was the one that came up with the public library. I don't know if that was in Europe at that time, but certainly in North America, he's the first guy to suggest a public library for the very reasons what you said. Books were very expensive. If you were going to give anybody a hand up, then you let them go in and borrow books.
Let me just correct you, in my view, on one thing. It's not socialism, it's about social responsibility.
That's right, and I kid anybody that rails about socialism. I says, well, socialism all around you, and public library is socialism. That's where the taxpayer dollar is spent to level the playing field, so the poor people who can't afford a book, or anybody that, not long ago, you couldn't afford the amount of books you needed to get around, to get through life. So you had to go to the library.
Just as a reminder to everybody out there, particularly those who are looking on Facebook, I can't respond to your Facebook Live comments because those comments are on a small phone and they flash away almost as soon as they appear. So I know 1 or 2 comments have been posted, and I'd have liked to have read them, but the text is way too small for my aging eyes.
I wonder if I can pick it up here and read it.
Well, don't worry about it. I have a question, because I was looking about this, and my question about this whole question about libraries is, yes, I get what everything is that people are saying. I understand the concerns, the monetary, you know, the spend, etc., and that's always a challenge. But I also look at the social aspect and how it gets the poorest and less fortunate people in our world access to that, you know, access to the books. Now, it is true that to a certain degree books are changing. We no longer have, or we're less and less reliant upon the physical book. The book like this that I'm sitting there and reading. Sorry to get in your face there, Dave, but
it's okay,
you get the idea. We're less and less reliant upon that. That said, Forbes has basically said that in this day and age, in 2019, book clubs are thriving. You know, they're using online, social media, email clubs, all of those types of clubs. You know, there's more book clubs than ever before.
Now, I know there's always been a book club going at the library. People still go into the library, get hard copies of a book supplied by the library, and then they all read that book and then come back to comment on it. So as convenient as that computer screen can be, some people just like that old earthy feeling of actually grabbing on to pulped up wood.
Well, I have to admit that love. I prefer to flip the pages when I'm reading something. That feel of the paper under the you know, under my thumbs, that ability to read the black on white, that ability to go through the pages, and that ability ultimately, when done, is to put that book on the shelf. You know, that has a very definitive appeal. And I know there are people out there that have never really been into books. You know, I get it, I understand it, and they read a book and they toss it as soon as they read it. So for them, often libraries are probably the best thing. You know, they can read their romance novel once they've finished it, send it back to the library.
Yes, but you may not be able, like for a guy like me, I've got all kinds of books, and I'll probably have to sort of get rid of them. I moved in, a lot of them I've moved in, and I've already actually got rid of piles and piles of books I had when I moved, and probably have to get rid of some more. But I'm worried that, and so I'm thinking, well, the library's a place for me then, and I can get rid of a lot of things and just go to the library. But my concern is what is available at the library. The library, as I said before, has been sort of losing a lot of its books and sort of staying with fiction. But history and things like that are very important, and if they start start ridding the library of things that have real value in them factually, but may not be picked up too often, but are required from time to time.
Well, I think the biggest one that I always look at the library for is directories. You know, particularly directories. Or I don't mean like Yellow Pages directories. I mean directories like professional directories. You know,
like the Dewey Decimal Code that the libraries go on. And
well, no, I mean like professional directories. So if you're looking up a topic, let's say, you know, some of the things down there, for example, law books. You can get law books in the library.
Yeah,
if you want to look up a particular case and you know when it occurred, you can go look up that case in the library. Now, it used to also be, there's a lot of like engineering journals, there's a lot of professional journals for almost every profession in the library. And the point about some of those journals is many of them, you know, you look at the 1985 journal on civil engineering, and the book costs thousands of dollars. It's not cheap. So that's why they were in the library.
That's right. I have some technical books on mill writing and other things. They are worth over $100 books, and you can't get them for cheaper than that unless you happen to get lucky and get one used. But I've bought books that were $100 for a book, and that was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and if you still want that book, you're still going to have to pay that loot. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I've got a collection at home of technical IT books, and they're all in the, you know, $40 to $100 range, and those are 20, 30 years ago.
That's right. Yeah, so there are things out there that a library would still be a good place to go and get these things from. However, with the library, no, you have a certain engineering manual that sits on the shelf, but that one guy or girl that's gonna need it, you know, once a month or that, and they come along and the library looks, well, this book goes out only once a month, so let's ditch it.
But many of these books don't necessarily go out as such. They remain in the library. The reference section to the old library that I remember as a kid used to be, you know, go along there, read it. You can spend all day reading it if you want, but you cannot take it out of the library.
Yes. Sorry, I'm trying to find some information here on libraries. There was something I picked up yesterday, and what I really like to talk to was, now this happened to me. Now, you know, as the Ontario government is cutting back all over the place, the Ontario government was very, very deep in debt and way behind the deficit. So the government felt it was necessary to start cutting its spending. And one of the things it did was cut back on, well, on many things, but this hit me. I actually asked for a book from a different library, because there's interlibraries.
Interlibrary loans, yeah.
About less than a week after, I just got that book, and I got a phone from the library and said, well, you got to bring it back.
Yeah.
Because that service is discontinued. If you don't bring it back in a few days, you're going to have to be the one that pays to send it back.
And you hadn't even read 5 pages of it or something.
Yeah, I read a sentence. That's about it, because I just wanted to make sure it was the right book. Now there is a situation where, yeah, I understand the government had a need to cut back services, but that is something that makes a library much less valuable, because every library doesn't have to hold all the different books, but if you know the title of a book and you put it out there, then the library can get it from anywhere in Ontario.
Yeah.
That makes your little town library very, very valuable. That means you have at your disposal every book in every library in Ontario.
And the fact that you've actually got some remote library, particularly in Northern Ontario, where the population is less than 20,000, maybe even less than 10,000, and you have access to that same book, is important.
Yeah, that's right. If you're in Kincardine, you know, if you're in Pickle Lake, you know what I mean? And you can get that book. You can get a book that it's hard to get. And you know what I mean? And your little library cannot sustain the cost of, like, look at a little library like I have in, where I have my cottage is at Dunchurch, Ontario. Right? They have a little library there. It's really nice little library. They've got videos in it, they've got all kinds of little books, mags and everything. But if I wanted the amount of library, you know, books are very, very limited. But if I wanted something like really special, let's say I'm looking at certain trees or rock formations up there, then I can look in the internet, find a book that would explain that to me, and then have it ordered interlibrary service. So although I do, as I have to repeat this, that I do agree with the government having to cut back. I mean, you have to do that. But what they did in this particular case with the interlibrary services is reduce the veracity of your particular library.
The problem with it is it was all too sudden. If they'd have given a month or 6 weeks or 8 weeks or something like that extra notice, that would have probably made it okay.
Well, they don't do that because of all the protests. If you lead up, I can understand the government on this issue too, because if you give lead up of what you're going to do, then you amass, like there seems to be almost like professional protesters out there that will find reasons to protest you know, changing your shoelace.
Well, there's undoubtedly professional protesters. There's the people who are out there on Monday protesting against nuclear power, and on Tuesday about climate change, and on Wednesday about the potholes in their streets, you know. So we know there are people out there that seem to be doing that stuff, but you know, that doesn't take away from the fact that there are some genuine people with some genuine issues.
Oh yes, yeah, no problem there. I think though the government is just reducing the flack they're going to get by not announcing too far ahead of time, and then they can take the flack later, but they can get the job done. And in this particular case, I don't think they thought this one through enough.
No, well, sometimes that happens when you make snap decisions. Sometimes. Now, I think the future, in a way. Now, I'm a fan of books. I think everybody who knows me knows that. But in part, we face a future now where I think it is books without pages and libraries without walls. If you get my meaning.
Yeah, it's sort of cyber stuff, right?
Yeah. But you see, that has its own challenges, because one of the things I thought about, and I think about, well, you say that there's things like film industry, movie industry. We've had films for years of all the classic books. However, have we? Because half the time, if you read the book and you watch the film, and the book and the film don't match. Well, there's a simple reason for that. It's because the filmmaker is not making the book. If you were to do the book as it is written by the writer, you'd be looking at the BBC style miniseries where there's 12 or 15 episodes to get the book out.
That's right. It's very, very difficult to get a book on film, and so you're going to have to sort of look for impressions that you can make, and hopefully get your point across. Now, I'd just like to remind everybody that do not ever get any of your history from a movie. There are very, very few historical films that even come close to real. Everybody likes Braveheart. It was like, nice film, historical.
It's got nothing to do with what actually happened.
That's right, yeah. And,
the only bit that really had any relationship was that actually how they put up those wooden poles to face the English army.
Yeah, the pikes, yeah.
Yeah, and that was real.
Yeah, that was actually it's an innovation that I believe later on became very, very important to the Swiss. They used the same sort of tactics against the Burgundians. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so I digress. But yeah, so if you want real history, you do not want to get it from Hollywood. Hollywood has Hollywood in history. There's no attachment there at all. As a matter of fact, Hollywood is will be jingoism. Whatever fancies the political sort of what's happened politically at the time. If you ever remember a movie called Little Big Man, it just doesn't have a really good movie, but it portrays the Colonel Custer as a real idiot, and so that kind of, at that time when Indian or Native rights were on the rise and everybody was protesting huge, so it felt good for the studio to make Colonel Custer look like some white supremacist, wacky, murderous dude. And unfortunately, when you do that kind of thing, it's not good for anybody.
No, and we don't know what his feelings were about certain things, because a lot of historical figures didn't write their feelings down about various things like that, did they?
No, he was doing his job, and his job was to contain the Native Americans. So you may think, well, it was the government. The U.S. government gave him that job.
Of course.
So he was just doing it.
The question is whether they actually meant to give him that job. That's another question, though.
What?
Well, this whole thing about is another film though, which is about Custer, the accidental general. Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't. But he's a very, very controversial figure. I'll tell you this much: that so if you can't really get anything out of movies and expect that it's going to be anything close to the truth. I think the one movie I did admire for being close to the truth, because I knew the story well, I read it, was Valkyrie, with Tom Cruise as Baron von Stauffenberg, I think it is. He's the guy that tried to assassinate Hitler in
1944, yeah.
Yeah, now that was very, very close to the truth. And in a 2-hour movie, they did history justice. If you read what really happened and then watch the movie, yeah, you're pretty close to the truth there.
Well, there's a couple of things I'd like to say regarding ebooks, because I was doing some research this morning. And did you know that actually ebooks, if you're going to buy a novel from the store, you might be paying $20 or more, and you buy the ebook, you'd be paying about $3 or $4. But did you know that for libraries it's often the reverse?
Really? The ebook is more?
Well, what happens is when a library lends an ebook, puts it out on for loan, and you can, so you can go down to the library, you can take out an ebook. They'll give you a card which you can then plug into your computer. You've got to use their software, and you can read that ebook. You can then return it on time, or you can extend your loan. But what happens is there's a cost per circulation from the publishers, and that often, for a very popular book, that could be a lot more expensive than actually the hard book itself.
Really?
And they don't pay for a cost per circulation on hard books.
Well, how about that?
Yeah. But you see, I think the thing is that they saw how easy it was to, let's say, steal an ebook.
Oh, I see.
Because if you get what I mean, what I'm doing is, if you're downloading an ebook, it's just a PDF.
Yeah.
right? So it's a transportable file that when I've read it, here you are, Dave, I can give you one. Or even if I haven't read it yet, you know, here you are, Dave, have one from me. So they buy, you know, let's say that it's a popular book, there's 1 million books sold, but there's 10 million books out there in distribution.
I see, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the problems with the ebook era, you know, because now, well, they're actually not PDFs, they're EPUB files, but I've got EPUB readers. Most people have got EPUB readers.
Yeah, actually, I don't. I only did ebooks for a little while. I still on hard copy books, but I can see the advantages of ebooks and readers. I used to see the guys at work, you know, and they could get their Kindle out there, and they could have, I don't know, 2,000 titles or something in there. And,
yeah.
You know, so
a lot of them. You can actually get a lot of titles for free.
Yes, you can get scads of them. As a matter of
yeah.
fact, I think I had some contraption. I don't know what I did with it, but it had. I think I could get 200 free books.
Yeah.
200
Well,
free books
if you want to read classic literature, for example, and you're really into classic literature, things like Plato's Republic or other books like that, you can actually download them for free from Gutenberg.
Yeah, probably, yeah, because well, they're ubiquitous, and you know what, those are really good books, and if you do take advantage of those things, they can really open your mind a lot. You know, there's free education right there.
Well, there is, but you know what? Do you know a mind-boggling thing about this is that whilst you can get many out of copyright books for free, guess who you can't read for free?
Charles Dickens?
No.
William Shakespeare?
Who would be at the forefront of making things free and available to everybody in the 19th century?
In the 19th century? Oh, Karl Marx?
Yes, bingo! You cannot get Karl Marx's books for free. They're out of copyright, but Lawrence and Wishart, the publishers in England, say that his books are their copyright, his translations are their copyright.
Oh, so they're putting up a legal block on.
Yeah, they put a legal blocker on there. So I'm not going around saying that people should read Marx necessarily, but it's up to everybody what they want to read. And
does that go true with Engels' books?
It's certain. Well, remember, as far as I am aware, Engels produced the majority of his books were co-authored with Marx. The Marx and Engels books are all under that same rule. I think the Engels ones alone.
Yeah, Engels is probably the sole author of many of those books.
He is, but the fact that they were produced under Marx and Engels means that Lawrence and Wishart own the copyright right now, and they're stopping that free access to those books. Now the irony is, of course, that somebody like go the other end of the spectrum, person who Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith.
Adam Smith, yeah.
You can get that for free.
Wow.
And you can get any book by most people for free, but for some reason Karl Marx no.
Well, yeah. Well, you spelled out the reason. It has to do with money and copyright. Now, but you can get Das Kapital which is Marx's sort of most important book is Das Kapital. And you can get it in the library. I used to get it in the library when I was in high school if I needed to look something up.
Well,
you can also get Mein Kampf, which is you can get that, and all this business about restricting what should be in the library and what should not be in the library. I remember they wanted to restrict things like Huckleberry Finn because it uses the N-word and things like that. But but they have they have Mein Kampf,
Well, the question about that one is always, you know, if he was writing that today, would he use the same word?
No, no, he wouldn't.
And is it wrong because he uses that word?
No, it's right that he uses that word because that's the way people talked back then.
Exactly, and that's the, you know, it may be an example, it may need to be raised as an example of what thou shalt not do in the modern era, but there's nothing wrong with it. I actually think there's a lot of good in that book.
Oh, it's a fabulous book.
Yeah.
Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, well,
oh, they were childhood heroes of mine.
Yeah, but you know what? They're really good adult books. You know,
Yeah.
I read Huckleberry Finn when I was an adult. I forget which one but I read Tom Sawyer, I think, but I didn't read Huckleberry Finn until I was an adult. And I got tons out of that book. I just really think it was one of those books you cannot put down.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, it's like, hi to everybody out there in Facebook land, and we're not going to be replying to any comments, but I will reply later on in person to your comments. Can't reply here, can't comment on what you're saying because it's on my phone and I can't see it. I can just see the panel flashing up and know there's a comment there. Now, I have a question. Talking about ebooks, we were just talking about ebooks and that. And did you know that the publishers now can know what you read last summer?
Oh, okay, here we go. The big brother watching you things going on. Well, I suspected as much, yeah, because this kind of information is being disseminated everywhere. If you, is it my guess right that if you read a book, then they know that you've read that book?
Of course.
Okay, now they just don't know that you downloaded it, but do they actually know that you actually read it completely?
And if you're going through the library system, and the library system has that security that allows you to read the book, but when I want to say download it, you can download it to your computer, because if you go offline, you don't stop reading it. But once you finish the book or the time runs out, that book disappears from your computer.
Okay.
Right, but the point being is that the libraries and the publishing companies know what you read last. Now they don't know that you read it all. They don't know. I don't believe that they know that you read it all, but they could.
Yeah, but at least they're tracking what you're looking for, what you want, and this is part of how artificial intelligence is blending with marketing. This is actually, it is actually a very big deal because. It used to be they used to collect data on you, like the most important one was where you lived, how old you are, and your race and things like that. And then they can pretty well determine a few things about you. But right now they collect data by the zillions. Everything you go on and everything you do, somebody's collecting data on that, and then somebody's selling that data or using that data. In other words, when they have a million little hits on you doing whatever you do, they can start to analyze you pretty good and predict what you might want to buy.
That, funnily enough, was my specialty when I was actually in the IT business.
Was it?
I actually did. My specialty was data warehousing, data mining, so that was using data and how you could discover patterns in the data.
Okay, and this particular thing I'm talking about is how
this type of data we didn't have back then.
Yes. Okay. Well, this is thorough. Now this all starts with begin with marketing, and of course every marketer wants to know how to appeal to, like for instance, if the marketer somebody out there can figure out that Dave Wheeler is vain about the cologne he wears by just looking at what I buy or whatever I do, then they can start hitting me with advertisements about cologne.
Yeah.
And but it goes much deeper than that, though, because it is now beginning to predict what phrases make you react to things. In other words, politicians like Cambridge Analytica, right, can start selling information on you that.
But come on, Facebook analyzes a lot of what you do on Facebook.
Of course, and they got in trouble for it. But
yes, they have.
Yeah. And so what happens is they now can sell it to politicians, and they can say, like Dave Wheeler, he gets mad about immigrants, and particularly some kind of immigrants, so they can jib and jab me and try to get me on board by sort of having a computer customize a political statement just to me.
Mind you, there's one that Microsoft had they had an AI that was interfacing with the world on Twitter that suddenly became a neo-Nazi AI because it seemed to, what happened is it went out there with, I'm going to learn and I'm going to talk to anybody and everybody who wants to friend me. But the trouble is, it then got drawn to this crowd of neo-Nazis out there, and neo-Nazis and white supremacists, and they soon shut it down within about 5 days.
Oh boy, you never know what's going to happen, eh?
You're having trouble again, Dave.
Yeah. Can't. I got this bum hip, so I got to stand up every once in a while. Oh,
yeah. Now, there's another note I found this morning. According to Michael Kozlowski, if I hope I pronounced that right, Kozlowski, the love affair with ebooks is over.
Oh.
You know? I bet you didn't know that.
This
is April 2019, he's saying that.
Oh.
And he's saying, here's the facts of the matter. Sales for ebooks are stagnant. There is a resurgence in print, so print is going up. And new bookstores are now opening, physical bookstores.
I think it's going to be a temporary trend, to tell you the truth. I think it's what always happens in society when things go hard one way, they react and go back the other way. It's called pendulemic propensity. In other words, ebooks really super popular. The thing, right? Of course, very popular, and you know everybody's giving them out for presents and stuff. So here it is here. Well, the pendulum swings back. But what's going to happen is it's going to go just dangle in the middle. Eventually, and what you're going to find, and my prediction is that you're going to find less and less hard copies because your computing devices will be so sophisticated that you can just bring it up on your hand and you can read, you know, War and Peace, or you can read an engineering manual at the drop of a hat anytime you want.
Well, I think that workbooks, ebooks and workbooks are probably ongoing, and I would say we will undoubtedly always have them.
Yes, yeah.
You know, and let's face it, many of them, the thing is, workbooks, I can remember, as I said, paying 40, 50, 60 bucks or more for a book, a technical manual, or advice on certain elements, or, you know, just work generally, that they would cost. They're not cheap.
No, they're and still books are. And
but ebooks for the same, under the same titles, are dirt cheap.
Yes. Now, but there are certain things, like for instance, I once got a book out of the library, and it was about outboard motors, small outboard motors. I needed to fix a 6. There's pipes. I needed to fix about an outboard motor, 6 horsepower, right?
So what does pipes have to
at the
say?
library. I gotta find out what it says as pipes. Is my technician, our technician in Florida. Let's see, I can open it
And
up.
you have to throw the mic down as if you were just dropping it there.
Yeah. Oh, pipes. I don't know. Pipes at this is yes, about 20. Okay, I'll be definitely getting standbys, but okay. Oh, so she's not at listening to us. Oh, unfortunately, she's at Disney with her grandsons. Well, that's a lot better. They came in from New York. Oh well, it's too bad. No sound check today.
Well, we know we're going out on Facebook, I hope.
Yes.
And you know, this is going to be I think we're going to be trying to do this more and more, and you know, just put it out there. Now, topics like ebooks, I think the question is that we've done a number of things over the last 20 years with books. And irrespective of whether books are published in a traditional form in a book or published in a new form in ebooks, there is undoubtedly one thing that has changed. There's also the ability to self-publish. You think about things like blogging.
Yes.
And that there's so much self-publishing going on today. One of the biggest challenges about the self-published book is how badly edited they are.
Yes. That's true. As a matter of fact, we just mentioned Pipes. Pipes started writing a book, and she learned very quickly that you just can't write it down. She wrote it, and then she read it and was completely embarrassed because it wasn't edited properly.
Yeah.
So she was able to rewrite it, and when she did, it was much better. But that's the thing. We all think we can write, and we start pouring our thoughts on paper. And
well, Stephen King has been known to say of first drafts that typically his first draft should be shredded and put in the bin.
yeah, yes.
And the reason he says that is not because they're worth nothing. It's just that when you make that first draft, more often than not, particularly when you're writing fiction, that you're doing it without thinking about the role of the editor, without thinking about the needs of certain, of the reader.
Yeah.
And once you get the editor involved, or even once if just the writer is just seeing it for the second time, then they start to say, oh, I didn't mean that, scribble that out. And oh, now they have to rearrange things. And the worst aspect about it is that when you're writing it, when you're just taking it from your brain and writing it down, all you're doing is actually brain dumping. There's a lot of good in there, but there's also a lot of bad in there.
Yeah, it's like a jam. If you want to think of it a bit, you think of Mick Jagger and any kind of Eric Clapton, a bunch of these guys. Every once in a while, they meet up, get together, and they start jamming.
Yeah.
If you ever listen to those jams, it's just a lot of rubbish, but they find worth in there, and then once in a while they'll pick up on something and go with it. But most of it is just like looking, finding, right, and like you say, dumping.
Yeah. Well, when you're writing a book, it's all very well to brain dump that story, but then you'll find inconsistencies in it because, for example, your hero suddenly is on the plane to New York, but then there's never a scene in New York, so he did nothing in New York. So why was he on the plane to New York in the first place?
That's right. Yeah.
That sort of thing. So the point being is that when you're writing, very often that first piece is not good. You need to do it again, do something else, go somewhere else.
Yes, and there's a real process. Like for instance, if you read Dickens is a wonderful writer, excellent. But then sometimes you think he's like overdoing it, overwordy, and all that, until you realize that he was making money as a serial writer.
Yes.
Right. So he was trying to space out his chapters in such a way as to make it last as long as it can, make as much money, and still be readable. So that was his technique.
Yeah, of course. Maybe. Well, back in that 19th century, a lot of books were written that way. We didn't have, today. I guess the modern equivalent of that is to write in blogs. Put your writing together, your story together in a series of blog posts.
Yes. Yeah.
And typically that serialization that he used to do in magazines, you'd have half a chapter.
That's right.
And then of course what you'd have is then you'd have to actually So you'd have half a chapter written in week 1. Then week 2's come along and the other half of the chapter's in there, but that has to still link to the first one because there's always somebody who's reading that chapter that never read the previous one.
Yes.
Right? So you have to do a small introduction of 300 or 400 words before getting into the rest of that story, and that occurs, of course, every single chapter you write.
Yes.
And you're right, they extended it for serialization because he was paid by the word on the serialization side.
Yeah, I think, was it Makepeace Thackeray did the same thing, right? William Makepeace
Thackeray Makepeace.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He made Vanity Fair is his most important work.
Yeah, a lot of those authors back in those days, from about, from sometime during the 19th century, might even be as back as the early as the 18th century, through to about the 1920s and 30s, a lot of books were written in serials first.
Yeah, because magazines.
And we're not talking here things like Reader's Digest.
No, and because magazines, the regular day-to-day magazines would include that as part of their like Life magazine, or I don't know which ones, but the major magazines of the day would include a story.
Yeah.
And even of late, I remember the Toronto Life had a story in it one time, and so people did even write then short stories and put them in magazines like Toronto Life.
But I just wonder, what's the future for things like Reader's Digest?
I don't know. I still see it around everywhere, in every doctor's office. I see Reader's Digest. It's going to be, I don't know. I seriously don't know. They're going to go digital too, I guess. I don't know. I think things are changing so much that these traditional Reader's Digest things are kind of staying traditional because there's so many of us still around.
Well, is it a case of they've got, they've still got several, let's pluck a figure out of the air, say 4 million readers, but those 4 million readers are the same readers as they were back in the 1980s, i.e. they're older.
That's right, and you'll find that somebody who subscribed to Reader's Digest, let's say my mother, would have got them every month, and they'd be all the same age type people. Now, Reader's Digest, if they've ever gone digital, I don't know if they're going to be able to download your magazine. Like, for instance, I can get National Geographic magazine now.
Yeah, we can get a lot of them downloaded.
Yeah, I get downloaded. It's a lot cheaper than buying it at the store. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
So I expect like Reader's Digest, Scientific America, National Geographic, all these will be available. And for those people who do have a taste for those kind of things, like I certainly do, I had to give up my National Geographic because I had too many of them, thousands of them, and my and they come every
You're
month.
a collector.
Yeah, so I had to get rid of it. I had to stop them. Also, I had a history magazine by National Geographic. Has a super magazine called History Magazine. It's just absolutely fabulous. But it, after a while, you start collecting them, and they not only take up space, but they're costly. But if you can digitalize them, you still have them at your fingertips.
Yeah, but you see, there's a second-hand market for some of those ones.
Yeah, there is, but maybe you've got mountains of them. They go into the dumpsters.
Yeah, but it's not that any one of them is valued a lot. They may not be worth more than about $3 to $5 each, but it's just that number 423 somehow has become rare.
Yeah, but you gotta be a collector, and you gotta know what that is.
Exactly, and I'd like to figure out the air there just for, just for demonstrating.
It's just like everything. Like I've got a box of Pokemon cards at home that I found you know. That I found out that some of those Pokemon cards are worth $5,000. Some of the rare ones.
My son probably has the biggest collection of Pokemon cards ever.
Oh yeah? Well, you should look through them, see which ones are valuable.
Oh, he's got some valuable ones, I know he has.
Yeah.
The gold-edged ones.
Ah.
They're really very, very, very valuable. And he was nuts on them. He had a job at one time when he was young, and all he did was he spent his money on that.
Yeah. Well, kids will when they get involved in something, you know, they'll stick with it.
Yeah.
And I used to buy baseball cards and hockey cards, but when the baseball season was over, I did the big scrambles. So I'd go into the schoolyard like all the kids did. So you had your stack of baseball cards that you bought every chance you had a nickel or a dime, and then you used to play for them in games. And I was really good at these games, so I accumulated a lot of other kids' cards. And then what I would do at the end of the season in October, when the baseball season was over, I would just yell scrambles and wait for all the little kids. And of course, I was a little kid, but littler than me, right? And I would throw them up in the air so everybody could have them, right? And then I start collecting the hockey cards.
So you haven't got any, it's fair to say you haven't got any ancient baseball cards. So no Babe Ruth in your collection?
No.
Or Willie Mays or...
No, I remember Roger Maris was the most sought after card when I was about 8 or 9 years old. Roger Maris, like nobody had a Roger Maris card. I knew one guy that had one.
Yeah.
And you would have to make an arrangement with him, an appointment to go see him, and then he would show you for a couple of seconds his Roger Maris baseball card.
Was it a rookie season one?
No, it was the year he got 61 home runs. He beat Babe Ruth's record.
Ah, okay. But then who's got a Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa one when they beat that record?
Yeah, but there were a lot more of them around at that time.
Yeah, that's true.
And a lot more card publishing companies. With the ones with Sosa and McGuire, you'd have to find one card company that was smaller and didn't produce as much. Then those ones will be valuable.
Yeah, they'd have had to have been valuable on that day.
Yeah. Now what I did do is I bought all kinds of baseball cards. When my kids were really small, and I didn't even open them, I just put them in a box, and I just gave that box to my youngest son the other night. You know, so I got a tin box full of all these baseball cards from the early '90s that were never opened. The packages are still there. The gum's probably not any good in them, but the packages are still
Well, just to wrap this up, as I promised I'd be back by about 1:05 if I can. Fort Erie Library.
Yes. Is it worth putting all that money into a library? If you have people coming there steadily and maybe using the facilities, people who are more humble needs and can use the computers and so on like that, or learn things, yeah, I'd say it's worth it. But to downsize, because that's what they're going to do about their books, that I think is the wrong way. Although, and I will get back to this too, that any library, no matter how small, can be very, very powerful, and if it has the ability to inter-province library loan, because that little library you have now is huge.
Yeah.
Right? If you're in Dunchurch, Ontario, and you want engineering manual that is in Toronto someplace, you can get it.
Without traveling.
Without traveling. And you can get a very valuable book sent to your library. Now you can't do that, which I think was a mistake.
Well, I personally think that they need to make the libraries a centre of more a community area. You know,
that's what they're trying to do. One thing we didn't touch on, that libraries are now places for homeless people, and that's, you know what I mean, like in St. Catharines and Niagara Falls. Sometimes in the wintertime when I go to Niagara Falls Public Library, it's full of homeless people.
Yeah, well that's a sad thing, but the challenge there is not about refusing the homeless people, it's about how we deal with the problem of homelessness.
Yeah, that's true. And unfortunately, I think people are put off by the fact that there are homeless people in the library, and they actually have to have security guards now. Like the world is changing. Like who ever went into a library and expected to see a security guy?
No.
You know, but yeah, they have them now. They have to because so many sort of poor people end up in a library.
All right. Okay, so I think we can say goodbye to everybody, and it's been a pleasure having you all on Your City Your Voice on 4680q.ca, and come back tomorrow. And tomorrow we have Maria Recruit in, and she's talking about should a landlord collect a deposit, security deposit, for things that are broken in the house.
Yes, that's a good one.
All right. So.